I was informed directly that everything would be left to your sister because I decided that I didn't deserve anything. I stopped paying all the bills for them, and I decided to live for myself. But a month later, my mother came to my doorstep in tears. "Help my daughter," she said. "Hello, dear listeners. Before we start, please write down from what city you are. We watched you, and we liked it. I wish you a pleasant listening experience." When I discovered that my parents had secretly registered all the property in my younger sister Sveta's name, I felt as if the long-term foundation of my relationship with them had suddenly cracked. I had never considered inheritance to be the goal of. From a young age, I was taught by my grandmother that life is about being a decent person and not expecting riches from your parents. But when I learned that Mom and Dad leave everything, I felt shocked, confused, and despairing. I suddenly realized their decision was clearly unfair. I had material needs just like everyone else, and they seemed to exclude me from their family. It was obvious that I was a secondary understudy, only needed for insurance and small household matters. The story of the will itself was revealed to me by chance. We had a great aunt. Nadsta is a serious person. She is always neatly dressed and wears thin glasses. She had a fashioned frame from her youth. She worked as a secretary in a notary's office. One evening, she called me softly, as if she was afraid of being overheard. "Mashenka, your parents made a new will. Everything is in the clear." I accidentally came across these papers during archiving. My heart dropped when I saw them. I asked Nadia again if she could be wrong, but she replied that she saw it with her own eyes and did not emphasize. I was told not to meddle in other people's affairs, but I decided to let you know because I thought that my parents should be honest with me. I thanked Aunt Nadsta, hung up, and sat for a long time holding the phone to my ear. Even though the conversation was already over, my mind was going through my entire past life. I had noticed it for a long time, the difference in how my parents treat me and my younger sister, Sveta. From early childhood, Sveta was considered the most fragile and tender, requiring more attention. My mother always said she was sickly and debt-poorly. "I know you're already a big help, so don't wait for our requests. You need to develop the habit of being independent and perceiving your sister as the one who is always more difficult." This difference didn't go away when he became adults. It moved to a new stage. Sveti was more often forgiven than restrained. She was released from unnecessary homework, as her parents claimed she needed more help. When she entered university, when she rented an apartment, and when she raised a career in the capital, Dad often proudly talked about her in front of outsiders. "She's such a great girl. She finds opportunities in Moscow herself. Even if she comes there, she achieves heights." They talked about me with a warm smile. "Masha is down to earth. She can do everything herself." That's all I was praised for. What I can do myself is my right to the same love, support, and care that Sveta received. Well, I'll never be offended. $. Was too much because my parents were really kind people, and I loved them. Sometimes, though, it was better when I came to them every weekend to take my mother for a checkup, to the therapist, or to take my father to the garden plot where we had currant bushes. My mother grumbled in conversation. "You're certainly good, but here, Sveta already went abroad. Now, probably, will go to another department will receive 3 times more. I don't understand why you're sitting in your office." I was offended by the comparison because I didn't want to compete with her. Someone likes the metropolis and I loved the silence in my hometown. I enjoyed working in accounting, and our life flowed before this call. The gap between my sister's supposed success and my supposed modesty culminated in the creation of a will. I decided to clarify the issue with my parents during the day. I took time off from work and took the bus to their town. Usually, they greeted me joyfully when I arrived. Dad got up from the newspaper, and Mom poured tea at my table. But this time was different. I crossed the threshold and immediately said, "I have a serious conversation. I know about the will and that all the property is rewritten on Sfiatu." My mother was rummaging in the sideboard, taking out some papers. She turned around and did not deny it. "Yes, we decided this long ago. You're good in Moscow." Everything is more complicated for her. My heart pounds harder. That is everything. The apartment, the dacha, everything is for her. I have nothing to do with it. Don't be offended. My mother said softly, "We love you. But that's what we decided." Svetoka will come back if things don't work out with her fiancé. And she's paying the mortgage at this moment. An inner cry broke out in me, which I've been silencing for years. Why did you decide in advance that her success is more important than my own stability? It's a formality anyway, where I'm still alive. And it's easier for you because you're not burdened with anything. You already have order in your life. I instantly felt helpless and anger because she didn't understand how such words hurt. I left because I don't need your support. I always decide everything by myself. Oh, Sveta, so all snapped. Mom. Not I. I closed my eyes, lowered my tone, but already said coldly, "Then don't expect any more help from me. I'm not paying for communal housing or trips to the doctor." My mother gasped. "These are my bills. Your father is already weak, and Sveta can't get out of the capital every week. Will you leave us?" I turned abruptly and went out into the hall, grabbing my coat. "I'm leaving for the bus now," I declared loudly. I noticed that my father was probably asleep in the back room and didn't come out at all. I cried in the shower all the way back, although my eyes didn't come out as if everything was burned. In the evening, I couldn't find a place for myself. Why? What was with me? It seemed that two states were fighting within me. The first part asks not to leave. My parents put you in the background your whole life because I love them, and the other shouts they betrayed you. I chose the second. Go. Call now. I'm under Humala. Let's Feta get out of it. I also have personal interests I can do. Finally, at least I won't spend the weekend on the road to my parents. I'll stop paying bills for them. We'll see how soon my sister will. I'll break down to help them. I'll live as I want. It's been over 2 weeks. I didn't pick up the phone when I saw that my mother was calling. As soon as I picked up, an excited voice rang out. "Masha, why did you disappear? Dad isn't feeling well today." He measured his blood pressure. "He's fine." I asked to speak down so that my colleagues I didn't hear the scandal and answered firmly. "No, I don't care. You yourself said that I can handle it. But it's contact her." My mother objected. "Sveta can't. She has a responsible project at work. They won't let her go for a day. We've been trying for a week to find out if she will help, at least with money. I will. In return. But since you have a will in her favor, she will find a solution." Goodbye. My daughter is on guard, but I was overwhelmed by a long-standing resentment. The next day, my sister called immediately. "You shouted. All the parents are in shock. Dad is sick. Mom doesn't know what to do." "Why are you disconnecting? Is she really so concerned about their fate if all the papers have already been drawn up for her?" I asked. "Listen," she sighed. "I didn't ask for this apartment, so my parents decided that I didn't know anything about your arrangements. If you need money, I can transfer it. But don't leave it." "Really?" She sounded annoyed. I also raised my voice. "If you didn't ask for it, why didn't you tell them it wasn't fair? Why didn't you insist on another decision? My sister said, "I didn't add anything you wanted. I've decided to distance myself for now. I'm tired of being a donor." There was silence on the phone, then short beeps. I don't know if my sister was angry with me or felt guilty. I didn't care at the time. I lived for several weeks in such a free mode and suddenly noticed that if you don't think about your parents, make it easier. I played sports in the evenings, watched movies, and read books that I didn't have enough time for. Yes, sometimes I felt my dad needed me, but I loved myself. Suddenly, my dad was really bad, and my mother was not coping alone. One evening, I even packed a bag. I wanted to break into there. The city was calm in the morning, and I remembered how my mother waved goodbye to the light of day and decided to postpone the trip a month later. I learned the news from my parents' neighbor. She sent me a message on the social network. "Maria, hello. My father was taken to the hospital with a crisis." They also revealed which one. "Your mother is worried about money. I just wanted to let you know that you suddenly don't know." After reading this, I felt a terrible pang of conscience and panic. It turns out Dad is really bad, and Mom couldn't find a way to tell me. I called my mother, who picked up the phone. "So, Masha, I didn't know how to get you. Dad was taken away. The doctors said that it was on time, otherwise there could have been a heart attack. We are right next to the money. Sveta has not sent anything yet. I beg you to help. Come talk to the doctor. We have coupons." Tests here. I didn't say a word. I was torn between pity and the fact that they called me anyway. When it got hot in the morning, I left the hospital without saying a word to anyone at work. I caught it. My father was very weak on and four. When he saw me, he sat up slightly. I went to him and said, "You're like him. I'm sorry." His lips were trembling. I didn't have the strength to be angry at the seriously ill man. I waved him off. "They put you in on time." Then my mother came out of the corridor and saw me burst into tears. "Masha, please don't leave us. We will absolutely need your help. We will explain everything." I nodded, unable to say what decisions. After spending a day near me, I helped buy some medicine and arranged for additional tests. My sister called only once, asking what was going on with Dad. At the end of the conversation, she added that it was difficult for her to escape now because, well, at least the money came out, since you get your parents' inheritance. She mumbled that she had already made a transfer to my mother. Let her check the invoice. But my mother said a penny. The amount was insufficient to cover the cost of 2 medicines, which further exacerbated my indignation. I was on the verge of leaving after assisting in the arrangement. I provided my father with the documents for a complimentary diagnosis. But the doctors subsequently informed me that my father requires further evaluation. My mother will undergo a comprehensive examination for several more days. She wept as she implored me not to leave her alone, citing her lack of acquaintances in the area. She expressed anxiety about the medical procedures and being home alone. I suddenly realized that we needed to bring additional items. I exhaled, acknowledging that my sister was unable to come due to work commitments. "I'm not going to stand by and let my parents rely on me again. I can't just ignore it. My father's suffering and my mother's constant state of uncertainty are too much to ignore." So, I took a vacation from my job. I called my boss and explained the situation. He was understanding, so I started my vacation. My father's hospital bed was intimidating, but I knew I had to stay strong. The doctors assured me that I didn't need to fear a heart attack, but rather understand the complex issues and challenges associated with my age. My mother, in her own way, seemed to avoid eye contact, as if she was afraid of my criticism. I noticed her laughing occasionally, and I knew she was trying to keep up a brave face. She was ashamed that she hadn't counted on me when I was making my will, and that was all. Once, when I was bringing her tea, my mother said softly, "Maybe we went too far by making everything out only in the light." And she didn't mind. "We thought you were always strong. You don't need anything." "I'm sorry if it hurts," but in response, I just muttered, "Now is not the time to talk about it." After a week, Dad felt better. He kept a diet, avoided stress, and asked, "Where can I get the absence of stress if my mother is crying from financial difficulties at home?" My sister sent an excuse, claiming the PO was delayed and the mortgage was suffocating. I decided to spend the night with my parents, even though I was angry at them for years, having grown accustomed to my dedication. Just as I was about to leave angrily, my mother asked me to go with her to the kitchen, where under the hum of the refrigerator, she confessed timidly. I understood how unfair everything turned out. I decided to rewrite the will. "My father and I will talk to a notary so that you don't leave us." I listened. Her tears ran down my cheeks. Bitterness. I'd lived in the shadows for so long, and only my father's illness had exposed them. "Do as you want," I squeezed out, "but you know the wounds from this don't heal in an instant." My mother cried even more. "Sorry, Svetoka, because we also thought she was there in the capital alone." "You never know. I couldn't think that I'd have problems." But only my mother answered. In the morning, I saw my parents. My father also admitted his mistake. I think he was sincere. He repented, knowing full well that I had invested money and work into the relationship. Sveta only came on holidays. Soon, they said that they would ask the notary to re-register, dividing all the property into two. I said nothing, feeling a certain emptiness, wondering if it was too late. But of course, it's better than eternal resentment. While they were processing the documents, I decided to go back to my room and do business. Mom begged to stay. Dad also asked, "You won't leave us?" I explained that I have my life, work, and I can't sit here all the time. "My sister will come." I made it clear that she is responsible. My parents nodded in agreement, acknowledging that Sveta's involvement won't cause any harm. My sister learned from my mother that everything will be rewritten equally. She called me, muttering, "Excuse me. I didn't mean to leave you out. It's just that my parents decided it themselves." I interrupted. "Because you didn't agree. They would also think, now you understand that we should help them together, not just me, right?" My sister admitted that she was going to come for a few days to replace me. Over the next couple of weeks, my mother sent me a photo via messenger of the new will. Indeed, it's clear that all the property was equally signed by my father. My mother signed it, and the notary certified everything. Looking over this file, I remember the shock I felt when I learned the old version was being hidden from me. Now, it's clear that this is a step toward rebuilding the relationship. If I hadn't made contact, my parents definitely would have thought twice. When I came back to visit them a couple of weeks later, I was greeted with unparalleled tenderness. My mum fussed over making my favorite cabbage patties, and my dad asked me more about my work than usual. I didn't understand. What kind of accounting? What notes? I felt like I was in another dimension, where my parents were finally paying attention to me. But the shadow of resentment still lingered on my soul. I noted that I would no longer pay for all their household needs alone, and my mother nodded hastily. "Now, my sister is on her own." "Yes, and we will try." My sister came to pick me up in a couple of days. We crossed paths in the corridor. I was already on my way out, and she hadn't come in a long time, maybe once every 6 months. Now, My conscience got stuck. I nodded to her and said, "Well, it's your turn to take care of Dad. I hope you don't run back." She frowned but quietly replied, "I know I'm guilty. I'll try to make as if." A nice wall is beginning to crack. She returned to my life. I knew something was broken inside of me. I decided to see a psychologist. I told him about my children's grievances. I explained that I had always been the reliable one, saving my daughter. The psychologist said that this often happens in families where one child is considered strong and the other is considered weak. I decided to rethink this. Maybe my mother was right. I didn't know what was hurting me. Little by little, I calmed down. I stopped reproaching myself for having arranged a boycott. In fact, I thought otherwise. This situation would not have moved. About a month later, I received a joyful message from my mother. Sveta lived with us for 2 weeks, really helping my father at the hospital and bringing us food. "Everything is really going to get better for us." I read and smiled, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. I'm not a favorite who only appears when it's convenient, and I'm not going to let the mother only share her pride and love on me. Later, we organized a family dinner to celebrate my father's day. Such holidays were strange, but I helped my mother set the table, brought the cake, and cleaned up. My parents thanked me briefly, but in conversation, they remembered that if Svetoka was, and I felt my sister, my parents, and even Aunt Nadezhda were sitting at the same table. My aunt told me that she was glad that everything was clear. My parents were confused, perhaps because they remembered how I found out about the will when we sat down to eat. My father was hesitant, but he did occasionally joke. Mom smiled, looking at me and at my sister. At one point, she started saying, "Daughters, I want to ask you both for forgiveness. My father and I were really unfair." Masha, we learned that everything is fine with her, and Svetoka was protected as weak. This is a mistake that leads to insults. Plain and simple. We want you both to be sure. Our sister nodded, and I nodded, feeling something inside me soften. Yes, technically, I wanted to answer coldly, "Too late." But I understood. If you spend your whole life accumulating negativity, you can drown in it. I said, "Okay. We have a common new start." I refused to take on all the burden anymore. "You mean that if you need help, turn to the light and solve something yourself?" Dad put his arm around my shoulders. "Daughter, we understand everything. We just get old, and sometimes we don't realize how. This is the end of the line. I was moved by these words. My parents took a step toward realizing that my sister and I have grown up. You can't sing one song and turn the other into a self-sufficient appendage. This evening, there was a lot of talk about how we will spend time together when Dad becomes 7. Better. They suggested going out to the lake to sit there with the whole family. I listened to the plans. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that my sister was also looking at me with guilt. She squinted at me, then took me to the side while we were washing dishes. "Masha," she said, "I really want us to have no hard feelings now." I realized that I should have offered to share equally from the start. "Please forgive me," I said. I silently wiped my plate, sighed, and replied, "I'm not saying that everything will be forgotten in a moment, but thank you for the apology." We smiled at each other, albeit stiffly. Still, it was a reconciliation. After this incident, both my sister and I tried to share. I could bring them food, but not as much as they needed to avoid getting into debt or leaving everything. I learned to tell my mother, "I'm not coming today. Figure it out for yourself." After a while, they realized they had a lot to solve without me. For example, they hired a neighbor to repair the fence. You know how to negotiate and check. Now, all of a sudden, we found the strength. Dad gradually improved his health. He could not brag about it, but he was no longer on the edge in my visits. We discussed my childhood interests, like riding an old bicycle. He even wanted to give me the rusty one, saying I could restore it. I laughed and said, "Why do you have to? I have enough ways to get around." But I felt a warm wave for the first time. I saw that my father remembered my childhood interests, and not only gasped over the success of my sister. My mother, of course, sometimes tried to habitually compare me to her. For example, she blabbed that Svetlana, the chief, paid for the trip to Europe, and you, Masha, caught me in an old habit. I just smiled, not wanting to start an argument or make comparisons. It seems to have stopped her in mid-sentence. Sister, after spending a couple of weeks with her parents, she returned to the capital. She promised to appear more often. And she kept her word. On one of her arrival days, she wrote me a short note. "I will be with my parents," she wrote. "Maybe together. We will think of something." When the three of us went out to the cafe with my mother, it was almost impossible, for we only went on short trips, and those were limited to family anniversaries. There, we sat drinking coffee and laughing. Mom looked at us daughters with a look on her face that said she was glad we weren't in conflict. Maybe it was too late, but it was good that she came to her senses gradually. I noticed the pain. Betrayal no longer exists. They were wrong. They thought I didn't need anything because I was independent. But now that they've openly admitted guilt and rewrote the will, I don't want to drag on with resentment for the rest of my life. There's no point in locking myself in bitterness because of a person in the depths of his soul always strives for family and warmth. Periodically, they will be weakened by their father's illness. They will do anything to keep me close to them again. As soon as my father finally recovers, they will come back to the fact that Sveta is so unhappy and that you are strong. I am a Provivania to the psychologist. He advised me not to let. My parents are on my case, demanding that I know confidently when it's necessary. They're always looking at their reaction. So, I did. Sometimes, my mother asked for the next month. I calmly replied, "Unfortunately, I can't. I have plans to renovate my apartment, so I have another option." My mother never said that she had found a solution. Before, she would have accused. I'm not heartless, but I know they don't want to lose me. They understand it's impossible. A lot has changed at my parents' house. My father has planted trees in the front garden. My mother is more organized, and my sister visits them every couple of months. I came most weekends, once a month, for months. They were always waiting for me with joy. My mother makes a pie. My father saves it. But it's nice. We're learning to really be a family, not living according to some scheme. Masha will regret the light. It took about 6 months after all these events, and I noticed I am calm because I am ready to take on a new role, one that I have chosen. If you mentioned it, I learned to refuse in time. We have improved our relationship to each other. No one else sees me as a soulless machine that pulls. I was alone one evening when I stayed overnight with them again. A couple of days later, my mother and I sat in the kitchen after dinner. My father was already asleep, and my sister wasn't there. She went to her own city. My mother took out an old jewelry box that I kept photos of our family in. Childhood years. I saw a picture of little Sveta in bows. I'm next to a couple of years older, frowning. My mother leans over to her sister, correcting something like a symbol of light and attention. I stand next to my mother. She runs her finger over the photo and says sadly, "You know, I saw a reflection of myself. You are capable of achieving anything you set your mind to. And Svetu is always seen as a Rani. Perhaps that's why things didn't go as planned. I told you not to expect support," you replied. "Mom, I wanted you to ask how I feel. I said, do I need help, too? Not necessarily material, but basic moral support. And you always put your sister in the center. Mum wiped away her tears. I'm really sorry, she said. Now I understand that you can't separate your children like this. I hope you'll forgive me completely. I shook her hand. It's already in the past. I don't want to live with resentment forever. We sat in silence. Mom looked tired, but there was gratitude in her eyes. For the first time, I was probably seen as the new stage. Parents themselves began to say that sometimes they expected too much from me. I am happy now, but not everything is so smooth. I am learning not to rush to the rescue if they call and complain about minor household troubles. I say, I'm busy, so let them decide for themselves or not call. But when something's really serious, I help without hesitation. It turns out to be a viable scheme. Judging by our family now, we still have a warm relationship. Mom no longer considers me a reserve soldier, and my sister doesn't build a pathetic one that requires all the resources. Yes, she also tries to keep up with her parents. The will is now distributed equally, and I no longer experience those bitter thoughts that I was thrown out of my parents' history. My parents' decision to stop paying my bills and servicing them was a strategic move that played a decisive role. Initially, I feared they would cut me off, but they continued to communicate with me. They realized they could lose me. Parents often act selfishly and repent late. But this is life. People change when they're driven into a dead end by necessity. We must not be strangers to each other now. If Dad hadn't gotten sick, things would have turned out differently. Maybe they wouldn't have. How did it happen? It shook us up and made us set priorities. As for my sister, I've moved on from open hostility. We're in contact, and she shares her successes with me and asks for advice when she's unsure. I'm no longer jealous because I know parental love isn't about who's more important. I'm glad we can relate on equal terms. If I need something, I say so. Svet, please buy some medicine for my mother because I'm short on money this week. She helps however she can, but she also has her own issues. This is another story for each of us. I must learn to stop blaming them on others. I lived this story, which exposed many years of injustice in our family. It left scars, and sometimes I still remember how my mother said from the doorway that she would leave everything to her sister. But the main thing is that these wounds don't bleed now. I've learned to stop. I'm the mistress of my own life, and I don't have to stand up for my parents if they don't respect my interests. Fortunately, now they do when we talk. I am not concerned about the future in our house. My mother sighs, let us live a long time. I smile inwardly, understanding that I don't hold on out of self-interest. It was important for me to feel justice and value. As someone who has been used to hearing that Sveta has problems since childhood, you have no problems. You can handle it yourself. Dad also became softer towards me. Sometimes he would call and my daughter I will ask directly, how are things at work? Do you have a rest? And then you are always tired. Before he did not ask this. I realized that he imagined I was a robot from such small details. We are all changing. If my mother sometimes starts complaining that Svetoka does not call as often as she wanted, I listen with a smile, but she will decide for herself when she can. Mom no longer quarrels with me because of this apparently adopted new rule of the game. The story that I went through taught me a lot. First of all, you must break free from the shackles of resentment. Take decisive action. Say, I'm leaving. Figure it out for yourself. Change is inevitable. It will transform everything more radically than years of stagnation. Secondly, It is essential to maintain the possibility of reconciliation if the other side is willing to acknowledge their mistakes. I feared my parents would hate me if I left them, but ultimately, our bond strengthened because it was inevitable that conflict would arise. Now, I observe my sister on her social media accounts, where she posts photos from business trips, bragging again. I'm here, walking through the queues for my mother. I understand what I need. It doesn't matter what she brags about. Our fates are different. I have a quiet job, my own small apartment, and the absence of a frenzied race for my career is going well. I'm not losing to my sister, and my parents aren't pressuring me to feel like I'm missing out. The other day, the three of us were out walking together in their town, and I felt really good. I'm not even a little irritated. My mother started talking about the good old days when my sister and I were babies. She told me about my father's job at the factory and how we used to have such a friendly family. I listened to the stories and laughed at the dad jokes. At the end, he asked me, "Daughter, let's do it again. We'll go for a walk together sometime soon because you're here less often. We like it when you're in a good mood, smiling, and when you promise, I'll come back more than once a week. As before, I'll come when I can, and I won't be ungrateful." We came to a new form, and in my heart, I feel relieved that the difficult months when I abruptly stopped helping and suffered bitterly are over. I do not regret doing it, otherwise, they would. I'm not going to shake up my sister. She'll keep thinking I'm happy with the assistant's daughter. My parents are sure I don't need their attention. It may end even worse, but sometimes, the hard moments in the family make everyone stand in the other person's shoes and think about how much it hurts. If my parents are sorry and doing everything they can to make me feel like a beloved daughter, then I did the right thing. I know that making them face the truth is sometimes necessary. I remember the day my mother practically shouted in my face, "You don't deserve it. Everything will be fine for my sister. She's in a different situation," and my determination not to invest another penny sounded terrible. But it was this breakup that turned out to be a reassessment of values for all of us. And a month later, my mother was already begging, standing on my doorstep, crying, "Help, my daughter." I understand that you're feeling revengeful. Moods no. I'm in charge, and I'm in a much healthier relationship now. This is how we live. Dad is recovering. Sister is balancing a career in the capital with frequent visits to my parents. I've learned to say no. I don't feel like a bad daughter. We all know it's equal. We're learning to communicate anew without the eternal background of light. You need it. And you already have it. I know that someone from the outside will call it a belated reconciliation or a reproach from parents, but I know that their opinions are not more important to me. I can come to them, sit with them, drink tea, and talk about your emotions. I can provide support, not from Cora. I stopped helping, and that could have ended tragically if I hadn't taken the desperate step. I believe that parents need to feel the consequences of their injustices. Otherwise, they won't understand how painful it is for their son or daughter to constantly underestimate family ties. Family ties can be strengthened with an illustration if all parties are willing to admit mistakes and change something. Time and life will arrange everything. I have the right to live without feeling used because another daughter requires more care. This makes the shower easier.